Hello again, and a second video in a day. Aren't you lucky? Right, in this short video I want to talk about learner autonomy and the flipped classroom. I want to talk about these before going on to materials because I think you might find it a useful way of thinking about how you'll develop materials, and it will also, I think you'll find, save you time in the classroom, in the virtual classroom that is. Learner autonomy is the holy grail of learning. Managers love it because it means they think they'll employ fewer teachers, basically, and teachers love it because it means their students will be able to learn anything, anytime, anywhere, for the whole of their lives. Now, as we know, some students are very good at autonomous learning, other ones are not so good. Some find it easy over time, some will always struggle a bit. So how do we help them? We have this technique called the flipped classroom. Well, what is that? Well, let's think of how we traditionally think of classroom and class work. We have the synchronous classroom, that is our traditional classroom. We have our whatever number of students, say 15, 20, 30, and they're all learning at the same time in the same place on the same subject. Then we have the asynchronous class, that is, or the asynchronous learning, where the students are learning by themselves, in other words, doing homework, which they then traditionally present to the teacher, which then hopefully leads on to the next stage and so forth and so on. In the flipped classroom, we're thinking about presenting and doing the work in the other way round. In other words, what we traditionally think as class-based work, where we have the presentation, that gets shifted all into the asynchronous space, so the student is learning it by themselves. And then what we think of as the homework, that asynchronous work, gets moved into the synchronous space, so it's worked with other students, with a teacher, as a whole class, or in small groups. That's it, really. Now, what are the advantages of doing that? Well, quite simply, it means that you're not trying to manage the classroom yourself. You're giving the materials and saying, you need to study this, you need to work on this, you need to watch it, read it, or whatever it might be, and then we're going to discuss it afterwards in our groups or in a tutorial or whatever it might be. As you might see, it's actually rather similar to the traditional concept of university teaching in many respects, where learners are meant to be learning autonomously, where learners are meant to be learning autonomously in a library, for example, and then talk about the subject in tutorials. In fact, that's where the I'm just tripping over myself now, aren't I? That's where the flipped classroom concept comes from originally, from university in 1990, believe it or not. So that's the theory of it. How do we make it work? Well, this is where we need to help our students a little bit. We need to set these concept questions first of all. We need to what's called activate the schemata. To get students learning autonomously, making them understand that they need to study the work before discussing it in class or in groups, we need to make them think about what they're learning. So we could ask some simple concept questions first of all on a given topic. So, for example, what do I already know about this? What do I think I know? What don't I know? And, for example, what things would I like to find out about this subject? Or another example might be asking a question, how can I use this information practically? By getting the student to think about this, then they go into the learning or the reading or the watching or whatever it is, the material you've prepared for them, with a more open mind, and they will pick up more information from that. Then in the synchronous phase, where you bring them into a video conferencing scenario, like on Zoom for example, then they will then demonstrate their knowledge, putting it to practical use, for example, or using it to develop a project of some kind. So what we're doing then is we're putting all that learning things, that process of the classroom, into the learner's environment. We're saying you are responsible for looking at this, and then we look at you when we work together to see how much you understand it. And from there, what you find you're doing is you're going to save yourself a lot of time in the way you interact with the students, but it will be more profitable for them in the long run.